Good afternoon, friends. Stephen Ben-Nun here with Israeli News Live on our Patreon channel. And I've actually talked to you guys before about remote viewing, but I really wanted to kind of get into this subject again because of the dangers of remote viewing. And when we look at remote viewing based on, like for example, this video here called "I Try to Master Remote Viewing." And this individual here, he starts out just by doing what we would call, I call it the amateur idea of remote viewing, where they take, in this case here, his girlfriend draws a picture. He tries to duplicate the picture that she's going to draw and put inside the envelope from, whatever comes to his mind in his remote viewing process there. And as he draws these things out, believing that he can visualize what's in the envelope that is there, once we get to the end of it there and he's done his job there, he opens up the envelope only to discover she drew roller skates and nothing to do with what he thought she had drawn. So there was no mountain, there was no skis, there was no lake, there was nothing like what he had actually seen in there. Now, that's a type of remote viewing that we've seen before. I want to play, though, he does bring out something very interesting in this little section here. Now I'm going to play what he says here just for the sake of history and tell you a little bit more about this, and then tell you a little bit deeper about remote viewing and, of course, the dangers of remote viewing. So let's play this section here.
Well, you might be thinking that there's no way this is real anyway. It's worth pointing out that in the early 1970s, the CIA established a psychic spy program that would last for 20 years. The program passed through various government agencies, but eventually became known as Stargate. The program started out by recruiting people who purported to have ESP, or extrasensory perception, but it soon turned to military personnel who appeared to exhibit the same skill sets. According to Major Paul H. Smith, a former military analyst and intelligence officer who would go on to become president of IRBA, programs like Stargate utilize this paranormal ability to make educated guesses about what inaccessible Soviet sites might be up to. While successes were difficult to document, in one instance a viewer predicted a new type of submarine months before it was confirmed to exist. The program lasted for 20 years, worked with 227 psychics, and completed 26,000 trials before being decommissioned in 1995.
All right, so they say it was decommissioned in 1995, but the fact is, no, it was never decommissioned in 1995. Remote viewing still goes on, and it is, yes, it is a military operation. Initially, at one point in the trials, DMT was used as well, using psychedelic drugs, things, whether it be mushrooms, whether it be LSD, things like that, to enhance remote viewing capabilities. And in that type of remote viewing, the individual, literally, they kind of go in a trance. They leave their body, so to speak, or at least the spirit of the body leaves the body, and they go into another realm, another world, into a spirit world. And this is where things really, really get dicey. They get extremely, well, how would we put it? You can really get into a demonic world. Let's just put it that way there. And we had successes in the military, and of course, like they mentioned in the video we just had up there, it was military personnel that were involved in this program that would volunteer to be a part of the program, and of course, they would do the drugs. Later, the government learned how to take, and by using frequencies, were able to mimic remote viewing abilities like a DMT. In other words, they had figured out the frequency of these different drugs that would cause the hallucination, or to enter into that realm where they would go into what we would call a hallucinogenic. But in some reality, it is believed that they would actually go into another world, into a spirit realm, another dimension, you might say. The danger of it, though, was always that they ran into is that when you get into that world there, you are dealing with spirits. And the best that I can understand, your mind reconstructs what you perceive to be there. So for example, if you go over there and you have in your mind you're going to see your mother that passed away, or your grandmother, or some family member, or something to that effect there, in reality, an evil spirit could take on the personality of the person that you think you're going to see, and then that image is put before your mind. You think you're actually meeting with that person. One case in point that we had, as far as when I say we, the government, the U.S. military, There was a remote viewer that was used for military operations out of Africa. He was brought to the United States. He is one of the best remote viewers that the U.S. military ever used as far as outside help there. And not all of his information was 100%, but I would say he was about 80% accurate on the information that he would give the U.S. military on different situations, battles, and things like that. But occasionally, of course, the 20%, they would be inaccurate. Even in the case of Africa, for the tribal wars and things like that would go on, he was, again, about 80% accurate and then 20% wrong. Now, he always would go by this one tree over in Africa that he always sat at the base of, and he did use a hallucinogenic of some sort, and I don't know exactly what he used, but it wasn't like what we use in America. It wasn't DMT, wasn't any of the LSDs or mushrooms or things like that, but if I'm not mistaken, it was something more along the lines of like what we would consider to be marijuana, of that sort there, that would help him to get into a state where he could cross over. And for better than 20 years of his experience of remote viewing, he always thought he was actually meeting a former family member that had passed on that would tell him about things that were going to happen. Only after 20 years to find out he was actually meeting with a demon. The demon finally revealed itself to him that it was never a family member that he had. Now, there's other types of remote viewing as well, and this is where military personnel actually go, what they would describe as leaving the body, going into another dimension, and then actually showing up in the area of a military operation, say inside of Russia, or they may go to see where Vladimir Putin is at. Now, the strange thing is the United States, of course, started the program. We were considered the best in the world at it. We perfected it the best. But then Russia got into it, China got into it, Israel got into it. In fact, I actually know one of the leading minds of remote viewing out of Israel, who works for the Mossad, as well as also does work for the CIA. And again, he's considered to be about 85% accurate in his own works there. And he, not like the ones here where they talk about they can go and leave and they can see things and they draw it out on a piece of paper. No, these guys here go into almost like a trance-like state. And I won't mention the name of the individual that I know personally, but we have spoken about these things. And in his case, he's actually gone and met what he calls gatekeepers. These are archons. These are demons that would not allow him to cross from one dimension to another. You see, this type of stuff is very dangerous. And this one reason why I wanted to share a little bit of this with you guys, because I don't know if anybody that you may know has ever gotten into things like this, but it is very dangerous, and you are dealing with a realm that is very demonic. Not to say that good couldn't be there. I'm sure there is. But the thing is, there's also evil in those dimensions, in those realms. So much evil that I know personally that the United States government has also learned to use remote viewing for assassination purposes. And I did a video not long ago here on Patreon where I shared that information with you. And I even named some of the candidates that I believe that were possibly targets of remote viewing and assassinations. It's pretty crazy. Very crazy, in fact, if you ask me. At any rate, I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. Wanted to share those things with you. I thought you might find them interesting. And I hope it'll be somehow, maybe if anything else, I hope that it kind of keeps you from that kind of idea of ever attempting something like that. I hope I've said enough to you to make you realize it's not the best thing to be doing. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live. Thank you for listening.